Okay, so notes wise, what I've got here is Mickey the Fist O'Shaughnessy. He's the big thug, fist fighter, smuggler, weapons and booze. Steve Atwell had the shiner, accountant, fellow boxer, pushover, works at auction house, got fired. The auction house was the one that got robbed. Rory O'Shaughnessy is the one that gave him the shiner. The note here about who's in charge of the auction house. Auction house, Gavigan's family, wealthy older brother Albert Gavigan, bookworm. Rory O'Shaughnessy, good looking, flashy with the cabbage, nice car, lots of dames, loves to beat people. Bill Rayner at the department told me about O'Shaughnessy being rousted from the pier by Morgan Coe. Mickey is a missing cop on the O'Shaughnessy payroll.
Oh,
Officer
that was Malone.
Malone, okay.
John Malone. Yeah.
Definitely want to make sure I clarify that. So then to make sure I got the hierarchy right here, Mickey is the second in command. Rory is the head honcho.
Rory is one of his many children.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And he's more of a trigger man than a fist fighter. He's a dandy. He's the new darling. You know.
So he's a button man. Okay.
Yeah. And if if his father were to retire or to disappear,
retire,
then you would just naturally assume it would be Rory who took his place.
Okay.
Out of all of his offspring.
So Officer John Malone is the missing cop.
Right.
Five down.
Yeah. With five of his associates.
Five of his people down to the favorite place. Missing people started about a month ago, according to officer at precinct.
Right. The uptick in missing persons. Yeah.
So then some notes and I'll get these moved later. I took the books that I got from Steve Atwell to family accounting firm. Then I checked in with not Officer Malone, went to the department, spoke with Bill, investigating the docks, saw people making repairs, middle-aged men, no normal workplace conversations, approached two individuals. They seemed shy but not uncomfortable, asked for my background. I told them I was Troy McAllister. Taken to basement, met two individuals, ledgers on tables in a storeroom-like environment. They were dressed in good suits, finely tailored, tattooed faces, tanned, Caucasian. Man had tarot cards on table, said he was waiting for me. Note here I made was somehow he knew it was coming. The tarot told him this was a random place I went to. They couldn't have known that I was coming. His name is Xavier Morgan.
Right.
Head guy, feels like he's trying to recruit me. And then tarot card on car seat, pull in driveway, my face on card, imagine a world of satisfaction in quotes is what it said. And then that's where we ended, right?
Right.
All right, cool. I just want to make sure that
the card had appeared in the Treasury office on your desk, and you took it with you.
Okay.
You took it with you, and when you arrived at home, it spoke to you.
And if I remember correctly, when I talked with Bill while I was there, nobody saw anybody come in. There was nobody present. So the card just kind of appeared there.
Yeah, he thought you were trying to play some kind of trick on him, which he didn't get, and there was a real flash of annoyance.
All right,
kind of that working stiff versus Harvard elite.
I'm never gonna escape that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's good for kind of a really quick review just to help me make sure that I got my notes, and I'm going to make an additional note in here about how I was leaving a paper trail about kind of some of my activities in the door tray next to that in my house.
Right.
You know,
just in case.
All
So
right.
earlier today in chat, you had asked how we could work together, like in partnership for this, like more of this in-character experience. And while driving the car, it was too awkward to discuss. But
oh yeah,
but one thing that has worked in the past, like as I've mentioned, working to build up description and mood and atmosphere about something that's, let's say, scary, and then saying roll sanity, is not something I enjoy, right?
Yes.
And so over the years, there's different, like when we're playing together in the same space, I've handed people dice or I've pointed at their dice, just to do it non-verbally and allow it to occupy a different part of the mind and can be more easily ignored. We don't really have that option here. So one thing that I tried before I tried any of the non-verbal things was cues. So like in Ubiquity, where we would say it's a hard test and everybody knows what difficulty number that is, so I don't have to say it's difficulty 4 or whatever.
A language of play, in other words.
Right. So here, what I thought is I would obviously be describing something that is obviously affecting the character's hold on reality. And there's going to be two parts to what I would like to do. One is I'll describe some of the physical symptoms, so you get a sense of how challenging this particular test is or what the stakes are. From mild physical effects like disorientation or ringing in the ears or blurry vision or nausea, something simple like that, working up the scale to shakes, tremors, the fight or flight response, like unbidden response, these kinds of things. And then at some point I'll say, and it's too much. I'll say it's too much. And that'll be the cue that we need to roll.
It's too much.
And in BRP, I don't need to know what number you rolled. I only need to know if we've got a pass result or a fail result on those dice. So at that point, if you pass, of course, you're finding a way to keep a hold of reality. And if you fail, you've been rattled. Right.
Okay.
So if you pass, you would say something like, there has to be a reasonable explanation for this.
Gotcha.
And if you fail, I can't make sense of it. I don't understand, something that indicates the opposite. Right? That makes sense? Is that cool?
No, it does. And I was kind of thinking about this because this is kind of a discussion we've had before too in the RPG groups. So the agency, like on a positive roll, I can use language to help you understand or let you know that this is a positive result.
Right.
To kind of maybe use a bit of a Delta Green reference, I could, if there's something that my character would do to comfort them or ground themselves, I can kind of narrate that as the positive result.
Sure, like in context, yeah.
In context. So like, let's say in a negative result, then I can kind of do the same thing, like describing how the character's starting to break out in the cold sweats, or if he's beginning, to describe how someone would begin to show a reaction in a negative way.
Right.
Do you think? Okay.
Right. And then I'll lean in with whatever thing I need to communicate. And if we happen to reach the point where the character has lost so much sanity that we have to get into indefinite or temporary insanity or indefinite insanity, then I'd have to invoke the system, and we would have to talk a little bit more. But
Yeah, because I think the reason why I picked or asked about starting the scene from the scene in the car is because I
we
think
need to roll.
I kind of feel like that's a
Yeah,
point at which, with everything that's gone on up until that point, the building, go to the Bowery, go to the docks, have this encounter with Xavier, stop by it's a compounding thing that when this event happens, this is the trigger. Yeah.
yeah. It's
So
the
we're
linchpin
definitely,
event.
yeah, exactly. Oh, I totally agree.
As kids, our mothers told us that if we did what we were told, stayed out of trouble, and looked to good men and women as role models to better ourselves, we could achieve the American dream. It's hard not to wonder now as the drought eats the heart out of the country and the dust delivers black blizzards and poor men beg for food while rich men fall from the sky. Did they know they were lying? Broken families, broken dreams, broken promises, moments of charity, holding off starvation for another day, so that suffering can carve deeper marks in the rag-clad children of destitute parents cowering in confusion in the shadows of well-heeled shot callers for the gangsters and politicians, with the police taking money from both to keep the peace. Keep your nose clean. Keep it to the grindstone. Keep it out of others' business. The words of our mothers echo down the streets lined with ragged folk with tin cups praying for soup. Can anyone turn this free fall into flight? Is there an answer out there that brings sense to madness? Or do we keep swimming our way toward Asculum?
So it is now night. You're sitting in the driveway outside of your cold, dark house. And the card on the seat next to you is saying,
Imagine a world of satisfaction.
and that is too much.
So when I hear the voice, my hands tense up on the steering wheel. So I'm kind of staring straight out of the front of the car into the driveway. I start to tremble, slowly look over at the card sitting on the seat next to me, very unsure if what I heard was in my head or it was out loud. And I just can't come to grips with what I've experienced over the past day. I'm not sure if it's the pressure of work, stress with family, the economy, all the trouble starts rolling through my head. I stare at the house. It's dark. I can kind of hear the wind blowing a little bit of powdery snow as it susurrates across the ground. And I can feel the cold starting to seep into the car as the heat dissipates.
Right, and the tick, tick, tick of the engine, right, as it cools off. The condensation on the inside of the windshield. So sitting there behind the wheel, car off, in the darkness. This card sitting there. It's almost like it's regarding you. You know, the knight figure on the card is charging, right, on a rearing horse across the card, right? And normally the card is looking out the side of the card, right? Not at the person staring at the card, but there's this very strong sense that the knight on the horse charging across this chaotic battlefield, right, as the winds of torment and change sweep in the background, right, there's a very real sense that this card is looking at you. This card with your face.
So staring down at the card, I'm going to take my hands off the steering wheel. I'm not going to sort of kind of almost slowly start to reach for the card and then stop myself, trying to come to grips with what's happening, reaching to think of someone who I can talk to, because I'm extremely unsettled at this point. Reaching with my right hand almost, I stop for a second and check the watch to see what time it is. Like, how late at night is it? I've kind of lost track of time. I've been doing so much in this day that I've been running all over. So I'm going to try and collect myself and think of who I might be able to go to at this time. Because I glance back at the house and seeing that it's empty and everything that's happened, I'm a little reluctant to get out of the car and go in the house.
Well, it's getting close to 9 o'clock at night.
My mind racing, knowing that I'm not too far from campus.
And it's been about 3 hours since you left work.
Okay. Knowing that I'm not too far from campus, I'm going to start the car back up. Or actually, no, I'm not. I start the car back up and then change my mind, turn the car off. Think about what I've got in my grab bag. I check my gun. Look at the card. And I just finally come to a decision that, I don't care what time it is. I just got to talk to somebody who can help me understand what's going on at this time. And the only person I can really think of who might understand what's going on is my old psychology professor on campus. Reluctantly, I reach over to the seat, hand over the card, and then I snatch it up real quick and stuff it into my inner coat pocket, not looking at it. I don't want to look at it. I can't. I'm having a hard time. From the last glance, it's just has me in a bit of a state of paranoia. My mind's still hearing Xavier say, I don't need an accountant. I don't need a Treasury agent. You know, these facts that he knew about me before I ever met him, knowing that it was a random place. So I stuff it into the inner pocket of my Chesterfield overcoat, pull the keys, get out, look up and down the street real quick, get my grab bag out of the trunk of the car. And I know I'm only a few blocks away from campus, but I'm going to try and cut through as much of the neighborhood as I can to get to campus as quickly as possible, and head to the on-campus house where I know my professor has a residence.
Sure. And it is cold, and there is a dusting of snow everywhere, and there's a glittering of ice on the very tips of the trees. It's not uncommon for this much winter in November, but at the same time it feels early, and you can feel it in your bones, right? You can feel the hard, crisp sound of your shoes against the sidewalk, right? Grit and grass, fallen leaves. And the walk, it's somewhat soothing, but there are moments of inexplicable heart palpitations, or maybe not inexplicable. Maybe that sign of stress and tension, right? But far above the level of activity that you're asking of yourself to walk to your professor's house. Right? Distantly, as if it were real, but knowing it is not, you can hear hoofbeats.
Glancing over my shoulder, you know, pulling the coat tight, check the gun in my pocket. Before
Everything's fine.
before I, you know, go up the little short flight of steps to the front porch, you know, I glance up and down the street. Mount the steps, and then just start banging on the door.
Sure. Right next to the door, of course, there's a bell, and there's a brass nameplate, listing, Dr. Carol Spinnaker. And the porch light is on, right? He is, of course, an academic and burns the midnight oil pretty much every night, staying up in his study, which is right in the front of the room, right? With a 3-pane, arched window that gives him a commanding view of the street, But unlike anybody else who would fill that room, right? His desk does not place him with his back to the window, right? So he could spin around in his huge chair and stare out at the world. His desk is completely at the other end of the room with his back to the wall. So as you pound on the door, it doesn't take him very long to get up from that position, step out into the hall, and you can see his shadow on the inside of the glass, right? And he opens the door unconcerned, and he moves out into the small porch area, and you can see him, he's got his pipe in corner of his mouth, and even though he's inside, he still has his hat on. He still has his overcoat on as if he's forgotten to take them off. And he opens the door, and there's a smile, but also a sternness, right? That line between professor and student, right? Alex, you're here late, he says around the pipe.
Professor Spinnaker?
Spinnaker.
Well, Professor Spinnaker, if I wasn't in need of some serious advice, I wouldn't barge in like this on your time away from class. But I really need some help right now.
You are welcome. Come in. Looks like you need a stiff drink.
I kind of, to my chagrin, say, grimace and say, I appreciate the offer, but I think I work as a Treasury agent.
It wasn't an offer, and there's no alcohol in the house. I just was observing that you look like someone who needs a stiff drink. Sit by the fire. You look cold. He's got two leather, upholstered armchairs right to either side of the fire for this express purpose.
I'll make my way over to the chair, set my go bag down, kind of take a hesitant moment before I take off my coat, touch the area of the front where the pocket is, kind of knowing what's there and dreading what I'm about ready to tell Spinnaker.
All right.
Because in my mind, I think what I'm about to say, he's going to say I'm crazy.
So when you touch the pocket of the coat to feel the card, it doesn't feel like the card is in there.
I get that wincing feeling you have when there's that drop in your gut. That this key piece of evidence for my discussion is no longer here. Which really makes me think.
It's not here.
I look around. I mean, it's obvious. As he's watching me and I'm doing this, it's now obvious that I'm looking for something.
Right.
I look at the seat where I'm about to sit down. If there's a day table next to the chair, like where you would put a coffee or a book you're reading, I look on that table. Yeah.
And each time you bend over, you can feel it's not a short card, it's a long card, it's a tarot card. You can feel it in there, but it's not in this pocket.
I'm looking through the coat. I mean, I look to the breast pocket of my actual suit.
And that's where it is now.
Is it visible sticking out behind my kerchief?
Yeah.
I give him my precious kind of hand on the pocket, and I turn to Professor Spinnaker and I say, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound kind of unbelievable. In fact, I really don't believe it myself right now at this point in time.
All right. Is this something I should have my notebook for?
You might find it of interest. It might be worth something to take notes on.
Is this something I should record?
I'd rather if you recorded it only be in notes.
All right, Alex. So he goes over to his desk and he gets his writing tray and he settles himself back in the armchair so he can look at you and near the fire. And he puts the writing tray across his lap and he's got a little ink pot and he's got, his nib pen. And he loads it up and he's ready to go.
Just before I sit down in the chair, I kind of pat my pocket, looking down where I can see the card, take my seat, and say, as you know, I work as a Treasury agent. I was always a big fan of the law and psychology and how the mind works. So the story that I would tell you is not going to seem like a rational one. And I kind of give him a very serious eye-to-eye look with that nervous tension of someone who's unsure about his ebbing grip on his cognitive resources would give someone to let them know that this is uncomfortable for me. I tell him about what I know about the books that have gone missing from the Gavigan's auction house. A good friend of mine who is associated with it provided me with some information, some of which I've yet to follow up on yet. But today's been a very long day, and this is not the most interesting part of what I'm going to tell you. We've long had a problem with the O'Shaughnessy's, and based on information I've gotten from my compatriots at the office, I went down to the docks to kind of investigate what was going on.
You went by yourself?
Yes.
Is that normal?
It's an area where a group of people or several new faces might have seemed a little obvious.
But was this a risk that you took? Was this normal for a Treasury agent to...
Yeah. Sometimes
Okay.
in my line of work, you have to put yourself at risk. I say, my family is the Thorntons, our accountant firm, and both like bookkeeping and the law, they have one thing in common, and that's accountability and responsibility. Sometimes you have to be responsible for taking actions into your own hands without being accountable for someone else's life.
Yes, well, that sounds like a pretty strenuous defense in regard to a procedural question.
It is, yeah. But the circumstances behind missing persons, which have cropped up in the last few months, along with the observed behavior of some of the people I had seen in the area, the O'Shaughnessy family has been kind of moved out. This new group coming in, the Morgan Co., has kind of really turned things around, you could say. It looks positive, but it doesn't really feel that way.
Could
So in the
you
course
explain that?
I kind of smile nervously. In the course of my investigation, undercover as an unemployed rube on the street, I approached a couple of individuals who were working on a door, asked them if they needed any help. In the process of conversation, they said that there was someone that I would probably need to speak to. I figured it was going to be some kind of labor boss, a guy in charge of the work crews.
Right.
But what I found were a couple of individuals, very finely dressed, very out of place in a place like this. Tattooed faces. It looked like
tattooed faces.
Yeah, something like you might see from like Moby Dick. You remember Queequeg from the story of Moby Dick? Something like that. They looked like sailors, but they weren't hard bitten. They weren't wrinkled in like they had been, on a ship's deck all the time, but they definitely looked like individuals who had been in the sun for a while.
And adhere to different cultural mores.
I definitely got that feeling, especially when talking to the boss, this man, Xavier, who was there as well. When I first got down there and started talking to him, I was trying to maintain my undercover persona, but
have you become a good liar, Alex?
The experience would tell me not.
So go on.
But not
I'm sorry, I don't mean to tease. I'm just remembering suddenly you as a freshman.
I try not to wince at the experience, still trying to ground myself in the confidence I had as someone who helped to start the boxing club at Harvard. I let the sensation of annoyance pass as quickly as possible and just say, I didn't notice it first, but on the table, this man had some tarot cards. And I've
Oh,
never been a big believer in this flim flam,
of course.
but he knew who I was. He knew my name. He knew my family's occupation. He
Well, the two
knew,
would be connected. So if he has a way to know your name, that leads him to the family. But go on.
but that's not the crux of it. This was just some random place that I picked off the street. It's not like I went to this favorite place, this place where the Shaughnessy's used to go all the time and hang out, that the Morgan Co. took over. This is a random warehouse off the street. I just approached a couple of guys who were fixing the door.
But
And
this
from
man
there,
who knew everything about you was waiting there for you?
just happened to be in the basement. And I kind of stand up, nervous about the conversation, you know, kind of go around the back of the chair, stare
That
up
would
at the
be
ceiling,
unsettling.
looking at him. But that's just part of what became unsettling about the whole experience.
Oh, really?
He knew that I was not really happy with how the family was pushing me to go into the business. You know, I'm not a numbers guy. I'm more of a how the mind works, how people tick. And I kind
Numbers
of,
help.
they do, but they don't always add up when you're talking about how someone behaves and thinks.
That's true. That's true.
Kind of wandering around from the chair, I move over to the fireplace, you know, kind of look down at it. You know, I've always been good with my footwork, but this is a place where I felt completely off balance. He knew I was
Oh,
unhappy with the job. He knew I was unhappy with the family. He just happened to be there. I kind of look at him and I say, you know, the world doesn't work that way, right? Circumstances just don't come together in a random fashion like that unless somebody's got inside information. But nobody knew where I was going today. Nobody knew what my intentions were.
not even your partners at the Treasury office?
They might have had an inclination, but there's no way they could have got information downtown that fast, down to the docks.
And you went to a random place in that area.
Eventually, I wound up in a random basement, in a random warehouse.
Was there any way for you to be herded like in a maze? Like we do with the rats.
I mean, I know you might not have ever been down there, but the warehouse area down there is like a maze in of itself. So any random door you might pick is just going to be another bunk warehouse, possibly holding furniture, maybe some bootleggers, booze, you never know. But that wasn't my intention to go down there to look for liquor. I was
Okay.
just investigating, looking around. And I kind of start to bring my hand up to the card. Is it still there in the pocket?
No, but you can still feel it.
I look down. I physically don't see the card there, but I can feel it.
You can feel it much closer. You can feel it like through your shirt.
I nervously, you know, I pull the neckerchief out, pull open the breast coat of my suit. Do I see it?
It's in your shirt pocket.
Okay, I grab the card and I kind of stride across the room and I slap the card down on the table, keeping my finger on it, trying to hold it in place.
Okay.
And I say, this is the thing. This is what's got me totally off balance and on the ropes. When I got home, this card talked to me. I could see my face on the card. It moved, Professor. It moved. And the color kind of starts to drain from my face as the pressure of that experience in the car and expressing it starts to come out.
Right. The
I mean, I'm
hammering of the
giving him,
blood in your ears.
yeah.
Now, he, of course, is taken aback by your sudden movement and the slamming of the card down and the holding of the card down and the passion, right? So he's leaning back. His eyes are not on the card. His eyes are not on your hand. His eyes are on your face, right? He's making contact with you, the man. And as you exert your will to place this card where you want it to be, I would ask you to roll some percentile dice.
48.
Okay.
So as he's staring at me, I'm not looking at him. I am focused on the card.
Right. And so the card dutifully stays put. Right? You're pinning it like a spear, like a lance, right? Through the breast of the enemy. But the drawing, the ink on the card, like fluid through a straw, slides up your finger, under your skin. The horseman charging under the cuff of your shirt, leaving the card blank.
I jerk my hand away and stare at him, stare at the hand. I start pulling I undo the, I mean, it's just a rapid action, yank the cufflink off, start pushing the sleeve of the coat up, start rolling the sleeve up. Can I see it still charging?
Maybe in the shadow, right, caused by the flickering firelight and the dim electric lamp and the position of you in relation to them, maybe you can see it charging up your arm, right, as you're trying to chase it, but it's not on the exposed arm.
I move from the card. I try to focus attention on my arm. I'm turning it over, trying to catch a glimpse, get him to catch a glimpse of what I'm seeing, and just start, my voice starts to raise, and I'm saying, do you see it? Do you see it? The knight on the card, it's not there. It's on my arm.
And he's leaning back in the chair, completely flabbergasted, uncertain of what to do, and you're pulling your sleeve up, and I don't know what you're talking about, Alex.
I look at the card. The knight is gone.
The knight is gone. The fact that it's a tarot card remains. It still reads across the bottom, the Knight of Swords, right? And faintly the terrain is there. But the blowing clouds, the dark charger, the knight on the horse, his sword, all of it is gone.
So pointing at the card again, putting my finger on it again, I say, do you see this? The drawing is almost gone.
I see the card. I see that it looks different than when it was in your blazer pocket. Is this some magic trick? Please sit down. You're very worked up. Please. Let's talk.
I'll snatch the card off the table, keeping it in the hand, keeping it out of the hand. The charger went up. I'm just going to sit down at the chair by the fire, and I'm looking at the fire and I'm looking at the card.
Right. Now, all of this has been too much. Doesn't make sense. There is a spinning, right? Not quite dizziness, right? But that precursor to that release of fear or nausea, right? That comes with pressure. There's no way that this cheap cardboard card could shed its ink. There's no way that there's no trick of light that would present this to you. And even in the with the calming voice of your professor, there's no sense of calm. It's just building and building and building. And so if you would, I would ask you to check your sanity.
So as he's talking, I'm looking at him. There's the brow between my eyes starts to pinch. My forehead begins to wrinkle. I can feel the tension in my temples as my eyes begin to water. And there's this very strong feeling that I am about to drop off the deep end. And I'm looking at him, half pleading, half angry that I don't understand how this can happen. I don't understand where I can get some help. And I just look at him and say, is there even such a thing as magic? It's all just a bunch of fake.
Okay. Let's talk. I can tell you I did not see anything peculiar. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. I did not meet this strange set of gentlemen with their strange ways and their way of knowing about you, but I can say that such an experience would be very unsettling for anyone. It would certainly be unsettling for someone who bears the responsibilities that you do. So whatever stress you're feeling, whatever tension you're feeling, it's understood. In a sense, you have been manhandled in the academic ring, which you are not used to. You walked in there to trick and deceive and learn, and discovered that all your secrets were already known. Am I right?
Like a dipper stealing coins out of a pocket, yeah.
And then maybe this man made some sort of suggestion, right? You said it. You said he knew you were unhappy with your job, with your role in life. He knew all of your deepest, darkest secrets. And how could he know more about you than you know about you? You whose intellect has always been your source of strength and power. How you carved a place for yourself out of a world that was pushing you to be the dutiful son. You became the Treasury agent, telling you that you are too slow and too, or not enough of a man to be a boxer, and yet you became a boxer among boxers. For this man to own you so, does he not have to be a special kind of man?
He certainly wants to come off that way.
And you want him to be that way to justify what he did to you.
I don't know if I can justify any of it. I'm staring at the card, and in the backdrop behind the card, I can see the fire. And in my mind, I'm really debating burn it or hold it. Burn it or hold it.
If you burn it, you won't stop thinking about it. If you hold it, at least it's evidence.
Still with that pained look on my face, he can see that my eyes are still kind of like welled up, trying to deal with this and reconcile in my head some way the rationale of it all. I'll reluctantly put it back in my suit pocket. So I'll look at the professor and say, where's a man supposed to go from here? This guy obviously wants me to do something. He said I would know when we would meet again.
Mm. I see. I imagine that would be sometime after you tear your life apart, looking for the satisfaction you cannot find because you are already dissatisfied with it.
When the first instance when he says that word satisfaction, my head jerks up at him. My mouth kind of gapes a little. I mean, that's what the card said. Imagine a world of satisfaction. That's what the card said with my voice.
Mm.
Am I dropping off, Prof? Have I hit the wall?
I'm leaning more toward mesmerism, hypnosis. To answer your earlier question, I don't believe in magic, but I do believe in the untested and untried powers of the mind to lie to itself, to create false worlds.
Kind of haunch over in the chair, elbows on the knees, rubbing my temples, trying to get rid of this clog in my head, as if I'm trying to physically push something to get my mind moving again. I just kind of shake my head and say, I apologize for coming to you with something like this, but you were the only person I could think of, and you were close at hand, and I certainly can't go to my dad with something like this. He'll completely think I've dropped it.
Yes, now there's a man who understands numbers. Alex, I think you need sleep more than anything else, and regular meals, and probably less coffee. You can stay here tonight. You can sleep on the sofa in the front room.
Kind of lean back in the chair, exhausted, just kind of like wrung out a little bit, a lot mentally, not really physically from the day and the exertions, and just I try and weakly nod my head. Yeah, sleep is probably the best thing I could do right now. I don't know so much about that coffee though.
Well, we all love our coffee, but you need a better habit, like a pipe. A pipe, Alex. It's soothing and it lends a man a certain, how can I describe, a dignified air. Lets him sail through life like the great ships of old, untroubled by the torments of the sea. And it smells fantastic.
Staring at the floor, I just say, I've never been one for putting on airs.
Well, on that note, this old man is going to trundle off to his bed.
Okay.
That's some sort of signal that works in the house, right? His maid, right, who's not that much younger than he is, right, just appears, and she has an armload full of blankets and sheets, and she's going to head into the other front room to make up the sofa.
I tell her thank you, and I really appreciate the accommodation, and kind of looking out the front windows, while she does her thing. Still this sense of paranoia, a little bit of paranoia that somebody or something is watching me, is keeping tabs on me. And now I'm worried about coming here and possibly jeopardizing Professor Spinkler.
So he again bids you good night, and he kind of painfully, right, not really the man you knew, right, kind of painfully makes his way up the stairs. It won't be too many winters before he might have to consider moving his rooms down to the first floor.
Try and get comfortable as best I can.
Now this downstairs just has the slightest smell of pipe smoke. New fire's been laid in the living room fireplace. Curtains have been drawn across the front window. This window is flat, right? A large picture window, which doesn't really have a view of anything except the old trees in the front yard. And there's a lifetime's worth of knickknacks, filling every available space, the mantelpiece and side tables and knickknacks, right? Things that Dr. Spinnaker's wife would have collected when she was still alive, and things that their children sent to them, right, when they still came around, photographs and other knickknacks. Long history of a family and a life well lived.
Try as best I can to get through the night.
Okay. So these two experiences with sanity have cost Alex 4 points.
All right.
And he is able eventually to fall asleep and isn't awakened again until the sound of cooking breakfast kind of brings the realization that you're not in your own home.
Yeah. Get up, straighten out the shirt. I'll fold the blankets, get everything arranged together nice and tidy on the sofa. Make my way back to the office where we were at from last night and recover my cufflink from the floor. Putting it back in its little hole as I kind of make my way to where food is being prepared.
Right. So in the back, there's a kitchen. The dining room wasn't laid, but there's just a small table there. Dr. Spinnaker's there with the newspaper and a cup of coffee, and he greets you warmly. Alex, I'm sorry to say we only have eggs, bacon, toast, and a little bit of chowder left over, and some baked beans and some tomatoes.
Kind of feels like home. I look around, thinking about the front room, and just say, it looks like you've made a very nice place for yourself here.
Boston has been good to me.
Over the course of the meal, I'll ask, do you know anybody else? If something like this happens again, is there anybody else I could go to who might, not that I don't believe in your experience and knowledge. But as they say, you always want to get a second opinion, right?
I think I will reach out to some colleagues of mine that I believe still specialize in these types of men. And if any of them are willing to speak with you on this topic, if they're still up to date on these kinds of matters, I will contact you with how to get in touch with them.
Greatly appreciated, Prof. You know, it really helps with my my investigation.
Certainly. Well, I must get to class.
Well, I don't want to hold you up from your students any longer than I already have. I hope I didn't keep you up, and I really do apologize for my behavior. You know, as we're standing at the doorway and I'm getting ready to leave and walk back to my house, I just say, you know, this whole thing still really has me rattled.
It's understandable. It's understandable, and it's wonderful that you didn't come knocking on my door drunk. It was quite refreshing.
I think my freshman days are over.
Take care, Alex. Come anytime. And I will send you the list of experts in this field that may be of use to you.
All right. Making my way down the steps, still got my go bag in hand. I'm not going to take a circuitous route. I'm feeling just a tad more comfortable with walking home from here than I was last night. So I'm going to take the sidewalks, but still keep my eyes out. Stop at the front of the house, kind of looking up at it, knowing that I haven't been here all night.
Well, there's a man waiting next to your car, and he looks cold and pissed off.
Do I recognize him?
He's a police officer, a big police officer.
So as I'm walking up the sidewalk towards the house, see him by my car, I'll say, good morning, officer. Sorry, I wasn't at home. Wasn't anticipating any visits. I just ran down to the shop for a minute for a cup. What can I help you with today?
My name is Officer John Malone.
I just stop and look at him. Malone. John Malone.
I understand you've been looking for me. I'd like you to know that you can call off the dogs, end the search. I've been found, and all is well.
You reported back to your desk, officer, already that you're back?
I will when it's time for my shift.
What about the men that went with you?
Oh, them too, all safe and sound.
You don't mind me asking where you've been? You've been missing for a little while.
We're all married men, Agent.
All you and your buddies.
Yes.
Not me. I'll make that I kind of draw that line for him there that he's trying to make an analogy that I'm not going to get.
Think of it as a vacation from the trials and tribulations of married life. We are heartily sorry for having caused any concern for the Treasury and, of course, for the Boston Police Department.
Kind of walking around the car, observing him. How's he kind of standing? Is he seem to be relaxed?
Yeah, except cold, right? He's got his hands jammed in his deep coat pockets, and he's just, he's got a scarf up as high as it'll go, and it's not that cold, but it's pretty cold if you're just standing around for a long time.
trying to observe his pockets, where he's got his hands. Does it look like he may have a handle in there?
It doesn't.
Okay. Well, I kind of pat him on the shoulder and say, I kind of get it. But, if you're going to be away from the desk that long for an extended period of time, it's better off that you let your superior officers know.
Oh,
And as
it was a very stupid decision to have realized that you made.
kind of moving towards the steps that go up to the front of my house and my front porch, looking back at him. Look down at the snow, look back at him. Any other tracks around here? Just look like maybe my tracks and maybe his from walking around in front of my house.
There's a line of tracks up to the door.
Mm-hmm.
And around the car and some cigarette butts. He's been here for a little while. And your eyes are kind of tearing up a little bit with the breath fog. Right. And that's when you notice John Malone does not appear to be breathing. And I'll close the curtain on tonight's session.
Oh.
Oh yeah, right at 36 sand. Thank you, Anthony.
You're welcome.
Nice. That's good. Okay. All right. John Malone, not breathing. I'm going to make sure that's the first note I make.
Put that down at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, that's move that right to the top of the list right there. Not breathing. Says he was out on the town from marriage. Okay. Okay, that's all right. It's good.
Yeah. I like the professor.
Yeah, I do, and that was really dependent. The direction I was going to take was going to be really dependent on what that role was from the car.
Sure.
The not searching for help situation. Yeah. If I make it, I'm still confident that I can handle what's going on. If I don't make it, it's for the character, kind of like we had talked about previously, and it kind of came out in this session too. It's that you're starting to break. Where are you going to go for help? What do you rely on? What is close to you? So that's
cool. Cool. Very cool.
So do you think go ahead.
Go ahead.
So do you think with the our little bit of a preamble about talking about the language, does it feel right?
I liked it better.
I mean, but is it, and we've kind of talked about this before at other times about having a lexicon, right, of words, things like this, but signals. Do you think the signal was clear that it was a negative?
Oh yes, the signals were clear. It was a negative. The signal was only 50% received from me. Right, when I wanted you to make the second roll, it didn't register. So I asked for it, but I think that could be mitigated by ramping up the feel of insanity more before calling for the roll. But
when I was trying to pay attention for that, it's too much.
Yeah.
in the back of my head.
So, there's all kinds of signals that can be done, like like two what? Oh wait, is that 2 points of sanity? Is that 2 hit points? Is that 2 minutes? We've only got 2 minutes left.
You making a call?
Yeah. So there's always that when you start to play with it, and so I think the key there is to not care, right? Either the signal registers or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And either you're confident about the information you're getting back or you're not, and because it's still a game, and being relaxed is more fun.
Yeah. Well, even in the relaxed state, it's just one, having the conversation about, hey, this is what we're going to try and do, right? And just having that in the back of your head as a player. And this is kind of part that I like, is that we're both GMs a lot. Don't get to play very often. As a player, just having that at the back of my head, hey, this is what we're trying to go for, right? Not just the theme of Call of Cthulhu, but
right.
Here's where we want some effort made. And then trying to be aware of it, being relaxed enough to know that if I miss the cue, it's not the end of the world.
Right. Stop the recording. We have to start again.
Take two. It's just, and a lot of it is going to be habituation.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Making the effort is one thing. Talking about the effort is another. Being conscientious about making the effort is another. So it is a lot of just habituation, and it's something that can be applied across any game, because it's not going to be, any game, broadly speaking, that deals with sanity or the breaking of someone's understanding, right? Delta Green, all these Cthulhu spinoffs, that phrase, it's beginning to be too much, is something that could be carried across.
Right.
It's it's definitely something in context that's easy to say, and it's not out of character.
Right. Yeah. Someone who's experiencing it with you could say it out loud, but also just the voice, your own internal monologue could be like, I don't get it. I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. It's too much. Right. Make it stop.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. So what do you think that Alex wants to do? What do you want to do as Alex? What does Alex want to do?
Big picture or overall picture, going from session 1, he still wants to make sure that Steve's going to be taken care of. There's this kind of certain amount of empathy that he has for someone like Steve, who he's got the smarts, he's got the wits, but right now, to kind of use what we're talking about, the cards are not in his favor. So he does want to make sure that Steve gets some help that he deserves.
That's good.
He wants to put some of these pieces together. The pieces that are on his mind are the stolen books, what's happened on the docks with the O'Shaughnessy's and
the Morgans,
the Morgan Co., and then reconciling his experience and discussion with Professor Spinnaker, my bad. Spinnaker.
Sorry, I came up with a weird West or East Coast name.
But it's fine. It's one of those things where when you type something like that into a Word document as a note, it's automatically going to have a red underline.
Yeah. Two N's. Spinnaker is 2 N's.
2 N? Okay.
Yeah.
Reconcile his discussion with Professor Spinnaker the books, and Xavier.
Yeah.
And the umbrella over this specific part of it is the card. How does the card, its communication, its experience, and his connection with apparent connection with what's going on, how can he make that solid for himself? Because at
Right.
this point he needs some pieces to click. He needs some more grounded understanding before he takes that step off the cliff in one direction or another.
The leap of faith.
The leap of faith, yeah, a leap of faith. So this is his kind of like, this is my descent into the darkness. This is my descent into the cave. I've got to go down and find this elixir to help me make my journey back out of the darkness to come to some kind of decision.
Yeah.
Make sense?
It does. Another question I had was, you searched all the way up your arm and then stopped the search. I'm curious about that.
He didn't really want to see where it might have gone. He really did not want to see
know
what might have happened. At that point, he's looking, he'd be looking at his arm, he'd be looking at his professor, and there's this idea that this guy he's thinking in the back of his head, am I seeing this? Is he seeing this? Does he think I'm about ready to break down in his office? This maniac has come to his house in the middle of the night.
Oh, poor Alex Thornton. He was such a bright boy.
Yeah, now he's gone around the bend.
He was wound too tight.
Yeah, exactly.
Why does this always happen to me? And why is it always in the winter?
The winter of our discontent. But yeah, he didn't want to see how much further it would go. At that point, he needed to stop because he was getting to the decision to where he sits down in the chair. And that's why that's why I tried to frame that scene that way. I see the card in the backdrop behind, looking at the card. I see the fire. Do I hold it? Do I burn it? Do I hold it? Do I burn it?
Yep. So it's interesting, really interesting.
One of the things I do want to say is I appreciate the agency, the directorial agency to push how a scene looks, to try and set up a scene without talking about, hey, this is, breaking character, breaking the game. Because in a sense, it felt like this is the setup of going to the psychologist. These are themes that we know happen very often in a Call of Cthulhu story. We reach out to the antiquarian.
At some point.
Well, yeah. Well, the Curious Case of Charles Dexter Ward, or any of these stories where the story starts with the character relating his story to
someone,
the reader.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of felt like a way to be able to direct this scene to keep the context of Call of Cthulhu, the theme of Call of Cthulhu, and how you feel about those stories. The ability to the agency to really try and push how that scene is framed. And by doing so, I was really hoping that I can give back. This is that improv give and take. I want to set this gift up for you. I want to see how because you talked about this last time, your ability to, as the GM, get in and participate in playing the character. So, here's this gift. I want to see where we can both take this. Let's look at the scene. If we both agree on it, which it felt like we were agreeing how things were going, where are you going to take it? What's going to be your response?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun because obviously neither one of us had any idea where it would go, right?
No.
I didn't really consider events for the session. or a timeline. And I didn't consider, and when we were chatting this afternoon, you said, hey, can we start where we left off? I was like, sure. Like, and if not, I probably would have started, it's the next morning,
Yeah.
That kind of way, and would have dealt with the psychological effects of the card in the car mechanically at the beginning, and then moved into the next day. But we got to explore the effect of that, which I found 1,000 times more satisfying. So
Yeah, I truly, and I like how the mechanic, because I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't going to say, well, how many sand did I lose? Because I knew that's what we were trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Just as we're saying, oh, I want to make my navigate roll here because I'm good at that. I like how to make the experience have continuity, that we didn't actually talk about the effect mechanically until much later, but we both were in agreement about, hey, this is the atmosphere we're maintaining,
right.
And it's something that we could do without hopping out of character.
Right. But at a certain point, we had to deal with time. Like, we're not going to sit here silently and role play you sleeping for 8 hours.
Yeah.
So we're going to fast forward time. So we've already broken through that. So let's say, okay, well, you lost this much sanity.
As kind of just on that note, and I don't know how much time you have. I know you're busy. One of the things I hope that I'm kind of trying to get across as a player is my ability to, when I have that feeling that, hey, I need to make sure that we are moving as far as pacing goes. Have you been able to kind of get that sense from how I'm trying to push my narration? Like how I'm trying to move towards the closing of something, like, okay, I see we're moving on towards ending the day. I move towards the front room. I'm getting ready to go to sleep. I make small chit chat with them. Okay, bam, we wake up in the next morning.
Yeah. It doesn't need, I think there's a real habit in a lot of gaming where the game master tells you what you just told the game master.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna leap over the table and slash him with the sword. Right? You say, okay, great, roll. Right, and they roll. And say, oh, you're successful. So you leap over the table and you slash with your sword. Sometimes that's functionally necessary to reorient everybody. There's a disturbance, or the person who's describing in that moment doesn't feel like everybody is paying attention, or doesn't feel like everybody heard the original description. So it's a reframing mechanism, as a purpose, right? But a lot of the times I find it's just habit. So I'm intentionally trying not to do it. So as you direct your character in the space, right? And I'm not planning events, but I'm thinking about spaces. So as you move around the spaces, I'm going to contribute things that I feel are necessary to be there for the character. So the leather armchairs in front of the fire, the desk in its unusual position. Because the desk was in an unusual position, that's what I started with.
Yeah.
Right? So in his den, in his office. So what's in his office? Do I need to tell you? No, you've got a strong imagination.
Yeah. Well, and this, again, from our discussions that we've had, I mean, this is literally the first time we've been able to
do this.
Have a game and actually kind of try and knit together how many years of chit-chatting and posting and talking past each other. But to kind of also kind of focus in just one more time on the scene endings, right?
Right.
So I
get a sense of when you are done.
Okay.
And if I'm also done, then we're going to end there, and I'm going to transition to whatever signal you've sent me that you would like to do next. I'm going to go from the office, right? I'm going to go from my parents' accounting office to the Treasury office,
Yeah.
and then I'll bring that together. Maybe it'll be interrupted, maybe it won't, depending on what makes
Yeah.
sense. And what makes sense in the life of Boston, not what makes sense in a planned sequence of events. Right.
'Cause I think as far as like that part where she makes the bed, does the sofa, and she leaves the room, the exit stage left is
Right.
it's just an easy method to say, okay, now you're alone, and
Yeah,
you're
you're gonna
in
sneak
that
around the
feeling.
house, or you gonna
Yeah, I mean, it's and that's part of being a good player though too, being able to say, okay, I see that this is where we need to end. I'm not going to keep continuing I'm not going to, oh, I toss and turn and I do all this and
I
I wake
follow
up.
the professor upstairs and say, "Look, I know you're trying to sleep, but I."
Yeah, because the intention of that scene got across, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of really what I was hoping we could do is we need to show from our discussion earlier, we need to show this how the mechanic can be woven in to play. It doesn't have to be obtrusive.
Right.
If people are following each other on the same page, it's actually a lot easier to do. I mean, familiarity plays a big role, but it's not that hard to do.
Another thing that gets demonstrated is that because we're playing on the character layer, right? Like we don't have a meta currency to spend to ramp up story elements, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to summon villains now, or I'm going to invent contacts, or you're not working on the story layer. You're not working on the environment, right, or on the world. You're working as the character. Your actions are the character's actions. Your thoughts are the character's thoughts. We're operating on the character layer, and so am I, right? I'm trying to provide you description that only the character would know.
Mm.
But you could think of it as a scene with goals, and I could think of it as an experience. I'm providing a venue for an in-character experience, and you could be experiencing the venue for the in-character experience, but also achieving certain dramatic goals.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and those things are, because they're taking place on the same layer, they're harmonious.
Yeah, and even though there's no meta currency.
As an example, there's no.
But to place that within context, right? The lack of meta currency allows a certain amount of agency to happen just on its own, which is something you really did not miss a beat with when I, quote unquote, invented a contact, right? Yeah. As a player, thinking about the character, who does he know? Who's he had experiences with? It's all context. And that's something I really appreciate about that is the play style and the openness of it, is that there's not that a little bit of herky jerky, all of a sudden I'm spending currency. As long as the trust between the players is you're not going to blow it completely. I'm not going to go to the dean of the psychology department, right? Who did I go to? I went to a professor that I had, a favorite professor I had for a class. That feels like a more trustworthy context for the character rather than saying, I'm just going to go to the head of the department, right?
Yeah. And when I was a Harvard student, the guy who copied all of my notes and owes me his life has now turned out to be a mercenary with a small crew of
bunch of operators here. Let's go back down to the docks.
Really, they might not be available today.
Really taking it in another direction. As we do a drive-by on the warehouse from our car,
from their heavily armored freighter.
Yeah,
we'll start with an artillery bombing, and then we'll move in with Tommy guns ablazing.
But even in a short 1 hour session like this, and I know you, like I say, I know you've got stuff. So if you need, anytime you need to cut this, just let me know.
I will.
From all the talks that we've always had about playing games and working towards this kind of style of
Yeah.
play. I think for me, as a player and someone who doesn't get to play a lot, that this is probably one of the better sessions from my experience of that, because it was a direct character level, personal thing about the character. Because I got to have a lot of stuff come out about the character, be demonstrated about the character, the vulnerability, the unsureness of his grip on reality, his connections and ties with family and organizations. A lot of that stuff gets to get pushed into this little scene that's probably no more than a couple of hours in game time or in world time as we have this conversation late into the evening, which helps to fill out a lot. I mean, I know we only played for maybe roughly an hour-ish or so.
I think.
But, being able to set it up, the preamble, hey, let's review those notes. Let's talk about where we're going to start and why. Because I think, again, that was probably something that we were both in agreement on, that was, our headspace was in the same area. That experience is something where the mechanic needs to be shown. Okay, we had to talk about, this is what we want to achieve. How do we demonstrate that? And then keep it moving forward. So, I mean, overall, even though the session is short, do you think that's something that we did kind of demonstrate fairly well?
I don't know if we did demonstrate it fairly well, but I think it was demonstrably demonstrated. I think because we laid it out, we actually said what we were going to do and then did it. I think
so as an example,
helpful. Yeah, as an example,
right.
It's good. I also felt it was satisfying play. Like I enjoyed creating Carol Spinnaker. And, there are things that I base these characters on, like anybody when you're suddenly making an NPC. And I enjoyed how those things came together, and things that I didn't really think about, came together in the conversation and coalesced into a person I could picture. And that's twice in our sessions where this has happened. So it tells me I've got the freedom to play, right? I don't have my hand on the wheel kind of thing, trying to deliver an experience, because the experience is happening, right? So I've got, the resources to give myself a strong in-character experience with these NPCs. Like, so Bill Rayner in our first session was the same way. I did think about a Treasury agent that we, where there could be dialogue, right? I did think about another agent in the office, right? A more senior agent, a superior, right? That you could talk to and work with, get assignments from, right? That kind of thing. And so he had a name, and I had a mental image of him, but his personality was completely different than what came out in the moment, right? And I love that. And he was like full blown character suddenly as soon as I started to speak in his voice. When he made his first self-deprecating kind of comment, I could picture his home, and it's really interesting, really very cool. And Carol Spinnaker was exactly the same way. But I hadn't imagined him before, right? So there's no name, there's no home, there's no door plate, there's no description, nothing, right? But there he is, ready to go. And so I really enjoy those moments. And of course, they can't happen if I'm teaching a system or juggling a system, or if I have to do different things as the game master in a moment. So
I mean, that's a big part of it, is that I'm familiar enough with BRP for the most part, and definitely familiar with Call of Cthulhu, so that helps greatly. I know that you're very familiar with BRP, Mithras, RuneQuest. I mean, just up and down the line. So, I mean, I really do hope that you do have a sense of comfort that, I do understand that you want to play too.
Yeah.
that you're not just here to run the game for me. That's, I mean, as a player GM relationship, I feel that part of my responsibility is to give you the as much opportunity as you're giving me to participate actively, to let your imagination bloom in a sense with, Spinnaker, which is a great example of how I think context and intention and direction just kind of came together to, as everything is slowly progressing, he's a professor. What does he do? What does a professor look like? What would his house look like? Those little bits of piece of information can just kind of, they don't need to be thrown up front, as some kind of box text description. They can evolve as we make our way through it. Because at that point, we're both feeling, I don't know what I'm going to be doing next when I go into his house. I don't know exactly how I'm going to be reacting. So we're both trying to build it as we go. So I really do appreciate the involvement, that you put into it.
That's awesome. It's fun. So I guess the last question that we need to address would be the sense of, did anything happen in terms of it's an investigation, right? With only an hour, of course, there's a limit on what can be done. If we played for 2 hours, and of course, then we're dealing with John Malone in the driveway, the man who's apparently not breathing.
Yeah, there'd be a little bit more there, but that's fine. I mean, it is fine, because I can't think of, because of our schedules, because of, I know that in a larger scope, there are other people playing as well. That's why I asked the question about, I don't know how much coordination between timelines you're trying to get. So if at some point, you feel like, hey, we need to play a catch up, because I don't know where I am, and I'm not trying to make a relationship between where I am in comparison to the other group. And I don't know how much because I don't feel like I have any influence on what's going on there. Nothing I'm doing may crop up as a bit of information in what they may be doing. I think maybe something that they may have done may crop up as a bit of information on what I am trying to find out. It's a possibility. So knowing that that's going on, it's
it's possible. You're in the same city.
Yeah. And we're hovering around the same event, it feels like. Will paths ever cross? Who knows? I mean, as far as characters go, would paths ever cross there? That would be one hell of a coordinated effort to get
all those timelines, all those time zones,
all those time zones together to be in one group. But even without that being said, the effects of one group on another are always interesting to see. So if you ever feel like, hey, we need to kind of move ahead by a day or so. So can we, for a moment, just say, let's hit this. I want to give you some information. If you hit this stuff, please feel more than welcome to manipulate the time frame.
Cool. One of the built-in mechanisms for that is research.
Yeah.
Because, the role can be framed of, it's going to take this much time, right, to bring those records together or whatever. And that, in a sense, has happened with the other group. There's 3 people. And so we got to the point where research needed to be done. Like so many questions had been raised. They really needed to go off and get some answers, but they all have different specialties. So they all had to go in different places. So that's 3 solo sessions. So that was the device that I used to be able to bring them back together again.
Yeah.
So if somebody had run into trouble and their research took longer, then they would still be out of sequence, but it all happened to work out.
Cool. Well, I love it. I really do appreciate it. It's fantastic.
Cool. Glad you liked it. All right. Well, thanks for playing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
And the conversation.
And tomorrow we will be having more horror in Boston with the other group. And I don't know, have you watched any of those?
I've I've only gone through the first one, which I believe is the one that you had with Ivan, if I remember correctly. I'm
Just Ivan, yeah.
just diving in because I didn't want to.
Spoil it.
I don't want to dilute my own experience from my end. You know,
Right.
that's kind of the. Do I binge
So
watch it now that there's 4 episodes up?
I will give you a heads up when you're in safe waters
Okay.
to watch them, and you haven't spoiled anything by watching the one with just Ivan.
Okay.
And
If I do start watching them, is there a point at which I should stop? Should I just stick with the first one for now?
yeah, just stick with the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, just stick with the first one, and yeah. Yeah, so they they've had some experiences, and but we'll get to that another time.
Mm.
Take care.
Appreciate you. Be safe, Anthony.
You too.
Tell the night of the massacre, so that he may know my vision is true. Imagine a life of satisfaction.